AI agents are everywhere, automating tasks and making decisions at machine speed. But agents make mistakes. Just one rogue agent can do big damage before you even notice. Rubrik Agent Cloud is the only platform that helps you monitor agents, set guardrails, and rewind mistakes, so you can unleash agents, not risk. Accelerate your AI transformation at Rubrik.com. That's RUBRIK.com.
Hey everyone, this is Peter, and welcome back to the History Shorts. Today's episode is brought to you by the podcast Republic, your ultimate listening app. Discover and subscribe to thousands of podcasts from around the world, including this one, and all in one place. Download Podcast Republic now, available on Google Play and the Apple App Store. Today on History Shorts. Now, when most of us picture Benjamin Franklin, we think of the inventor, the printer, the kite and key in a thunderstorm. But perhaps his greatest act of genius didn't take place in a laboratory at all. It all happened in the glittering courts and smoky salons of the 18th century Paris. At a time when the fledgling United States was broke, divided, and on the brink of military collapse, Franklin became America's unlikely savior, not through invention or writing, but through diplomacy. This is a story of Benjamin Franklin's most important mission, the years that he spent in France convincing one of Europe's greatest powers to gamble everything on a revolution across the sea.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
When Franklin set sail for France in the winter of 1776, the American Revolution was hanging by a thread. The Declaration of Independence had been signed only months before, but the new nation was already gasping for survival. Washington's army was undersupplied, outnumbered, and retreating. The Continental Congress had very little money, no navy, and no allies. If America was going to win its war of independence, it would need something more powerful than muskets or courage. It would need friends, and powerful friends at that. So Congress turned to the one man who could make that happen, and that's Benjamin Franklin. By then, Franklin was 70 years old, gray-haired, eyeglass-wearing, and world-famous. In Europe, he wasn't seen as a rebel or traitor. He was an Enlightenment icon, a living symbol of reason, science, and wit. You might say, or actually we should say, he was the most famous American in the world. His discoveries with electricity had made him a celebrity decades before he ever entered politics. And it was precisely that reputation, his blend of intellect, humility, and charm, that made him the perfect choice to court the one ally America desperately needed, France. Franklin landed in France in December of 1776. It was a world of silk and ceremony, utterly unlike the rough streets of Philadelphia. Paris at the time was the beating heart of the Enlightenment, a place where philosophers, scientists, and politicians mingled in salons, trading ideas about liberty, reason, and the rights of man. And Franklin, to the French, seemed to embody all of those ideals. He arrived not in a powdered wig, but in a simple fur hat. To the French aristocracy, this modest appearance wasn't rustic, it was revolutionary. Franklin was the philosopher from the New World, the embodiment of virtue untarnished by Europe's corruption. The French adored him. Portraits of Franklin appeared in shop windows. His image was engraved on snuff boxes and china. Women wore medallions of his face. Philosophers quoted him as if he were a prophet of reason. But behind the charm and the spectacles, Franklin was playing a far more serious game. He had come to France not to dazzle, but really to persuade, to convince King Louis XVI's government to recognize American independence, and support it with money, ships, and troops. That was no small task. The French monarchy, though eager to weaken Britain after losing the 7 Years' War, was very cautious. Backing a group of colonial rebels against a European power could trigger another catastrophic conflict. So Franklin did what he did best. He played the long game. Franklin cultivated relationships across the spectrum of French society, from philosophers like Voltaire to foreign ministers like Charles Gravier. He moved gracefully between worlds, the salons of Paris and the marble halls of Versailles, the candlelit gatherings of intellectuals and the secret backrooms of politics. And everywhere he went, well, he charmed everyone. Franklin spoke to France's heart through its ideals, portraying the American Revolution as a moral struggle for liberty and human rights. At the same time, he appealed to France's head, reminding ministers that a weakened Britain meant a stronger France. He was, in every sense, a master of dual diplomacy, idealism with strategy. In early 1777, even before any formal alliance, Franklin secured critical loans and supplies from sympathetic French financiers. Muskets, gunpowder, uniforms, and funds began quietly flowing across the Atlantic, lifelines for the struggling Continental Army. Then in the fall of 1777, everything changed. News had arrived from America, the Battle of Saratoga. An entire British army had surrendered to American forces, the first major victory of the war. And suddenly, the impossible seemed possible. Franklin seized the moment. He pressed the French court to recognize the United States, arguing that if France didn't act now, Britain might make peace and restore its colonies. Within months, Franklin's patience paid off. On February 6, 1778, France signed 2 treaties with the United States, one of commerce and the other of alliance. The second treaty promised full military support against Britain. The revolution was no longer just a rebellion, it was now part of a global war. The French alliance transformed everything. French money kept the Continental Army afloat. French ships battled the Royal Navy. French troops fought beside Washington's men. And in 1781 at Yorktown, the alliance reached its climax. The French fleet under Admiral de Grasse blocked the Chesapeake Bay, trapping British forces under Lord Cornwallis. French and American troops, commanded by General Rochambeau and George Washington, closed in on land. It was the victory Franklin had spent 5 years crafting. Yorktown's triumph would have been impossible without the treaties that he, Benjamin Franklin, had forged, the loans that he had secured, and the goodwill that he had built among France's powerful elite. Of course, Franklin's legend in France wasn't built solely on politics. He became a social phenomenon, which I alluded to before. He dined with philosophers, attended parties, and even in his 70s, gained a reputation as something of a flirt. Paris adored him for it. He embodied the French idea of the enlightened gentleman, witty, courteous, unpretentious, and alive to the pleasures of conversation. Behind the charm, however, Franklin understood the power of image. His flirtations and wit weren't frivolous. They were diplomatic theater. Each smile, each story, each clever remark strengthened his network and drew sympathy for the American cause. He made rebellion fashionable, you might say, turning the American Revolution into the most glamorous cause in Europe. But diplomacy was not all charm. Franklin had to manage bitter rivalries with his fellow American envoys, Silas Dane and Arthur Lee, who often undermined him. He also had to weather shifting politics within France itself, as ministers and priorities changed quite often. Yet through it all, he maintained patience and pragmatism, qualities that made him the backbone of America's foreign diplomacy. By the time Franklin returned home in 1785, the war was over. The United States was independent, and he was its hero, both at home and abroad. But the true significance of his mission went far beyond the revolution itself. He had defined the art of American diplomacy, a balance of moral principle and practical alliance, of idealism and realpolitik. The Treaty of Paris in 1783, which formally ended the war, was signed by Franklin himself, alongside John Adams and John Jay. The treaty, which recognized American sovereignty, was the direct result of the alliances and relationships that Franklin had built. He had done what no army could do alone. He had convinced the world that the United States deserved to exist. His mission to France didn't just win a war, it secured America's place among nations. Hopefully today's episode has inspired you to seek out and learn more about this subject. For answers to questions, sources for today's episode, to leave a comment, or check out upcoming guest announcements, visit www.historyshortspodcast.com or look for History Shorts Podcast on Facebook, X, and Patreon. Stay curious, and I will talk to you all tomorrow.